I tutored my friend's sister for free, then her parents showed up at my job with a restraining order. I was grading papers when the principal walked in with two strangers and a police officer. The woman in the navy suit spoke first. "Are you David Thompson?" Her voice was ice cold. "I'm attorney Lisa Hayes, and these are my clients, Robert and Diana Foster. We need to discuss your inappropriate relationship with their daughter." The words hit like a punch. My mind went to Maya, my friend Jamie's little sister who I'd been helping with algebra for 2 months. She was struggling in advanced math, and Jamie had asked if I could tutor her since I taught high school mathematics. I'd agreed without hesitation because Jamie had been my college roommate and closest friend. Every session had been completely professional, usually at the public library with other people around. I'd never charged them anything because I wanted to help. "I think there's been a misunderstanding," I managed, though my voice shook. Robert Foster stepped forward with clenched fists. "Don't pretend you don't know what this is about. We have screenshots of your messages to our daughter, inappropriate comments about her appearance, requests to meet alone, suggestions about private sessions at your apartment." None of that was true. Every text I'd sent Maya had been about scheduling study sessions or explaining math concepts. I'd never commented on her appearance beyond suggesting she get more sleep before tests. I'd specifically avoided meeting at my apartment because it might seem inappropriate. "Can I see these messages?" "I think you might have the wrong person." Attorney Hayes opened her folder and pulled out printed screenshots. The phone number was definitely mine, and the messages were sexual in nature. One talked about how beautiful Maya looked in her school photos. Another suggested private lessons at my place where they wouldn't be interrupted. The problem was, I'd never sent any of these messages. Someone had either faked them or used my number to send them. But looking at the printouts, they appeared completely authentic. The timestamps showed they'd been sent over 3 weeks, usually late at night around 10 or 11 p.m. During those times, I was either grading papers or asleep. I lived alone, so I had no way to prove where I'd been. Principal Davis cleared his throat uncomfortably. "David, I need you to come to my office while we sort this out. Officer Johnson will escort you." The walk down the hallway felt like a death march. Students were changing classes, and I could feel their curious stares as I passed with a police officer. Word would spread within minutes that Mr. Thompson was in trouble. My teaching career was probably over before we reached the principal's office. Inside the office, Attorney Hayes spread more documents across the desk. Along with the screenshots were printed photos she claimed came from my social media. They showed me at various locations around town, with Maya circled in the background of several images. In one, I was having coffee at Starbucks, and she was visible 3 tables away with friends. In another, I was shopping at Target, and she appeared in the same aisle looking at school supplies. The implication was clear, but wrong. I hadn't been following her. These were random coincidences in a small town where everyone shopped at the same places. But the photos made it look like I was systematically tracking her movements. Robert Foster's voice shook with rage. "You've been following our daughter, texting her inappropriate messages, and trying to isolate her for private sessions. We won't let you hurt her." "This is all wrong," I said, trying to stay calm. "I've been tutoring Maya at Jamie's request, always in public places, always focused on mathematics. I've never sent inappropriate messages or followed her anywhere. Someone is impersonating me or these documents are fake." Officer Johnson looked up from his notepad. "Do you have your phone, Mr. Thompson? We'd like to see your message history with the victim." I handed over my phone without hesitation because my actual messages with Maya were completely innocent. We'd texted about algebra problems, scheduling sessions, and her progress on tests. Nothing personal, nothing inappropriate. Officer Johnson scrolled through my messages for several minutes while everyone waited. Finally, he looked up confused. "Sir, the messages on your phone don't match these screenshots at all. Everything here looks like normal tutoring conversations." Attorney Hayes recovered quickly. He obviously deleted the inappropriate messages after sending them. That's standard predator behavior, covering tracks after grooming activities. The word predator made my hands shake. I'd devoted my career to helping kids learn mathematics, and the idea that someone thought I was using that position to harm students was devastating. But I could see how the evidence looked from their perspective. Text screenshots that appeared authentic, photos showing me in the same locations as their daughter, requests for private tutoring that could be misinterpreted. Someone had carefully constructed a convincing case against me. Principal Davis was writing notes furiously. "David, I have to place you on administrative leave pending investigation. You need to surrender your building access and remove personal items from your classroom today." Administrative leave felt like a death sentence. Even if eventually cleared, the rumors would follow me for years. Parents would always wonder if there was truth to the accusations. Students would look at me differently. Other teachers would gossip about what really happened. My reputation was destroyed regardless of the outcome. Officer Johnson stood and adjusted his belt. Mr. and Mrs. Foster, you'll need to go to the courthouse to file for the restraining order. Based on what we've seen, there's probable cause. Mr. Thompson, stay away from Maya Foster and avoid contact with the family while this proceeds. As they prepared to leave, I had one desperate question. Can I at least call Jamie to explain what's happening? He's my friend, and his sister is involved, so he deserves to know. Robert Foster turned with pure hatred. Jamie, you mean the drug dealer who's been supplying parties for high school kids? Yeah, we know all about your friend Jamie. The room went silent. Jamie, a drug dealer? That was impossible. Jamie worked as a software developer for a tech startup downtown. He'd never shown interest in drugs beyond occasional beer during football games. He was one of the most responsible people I knew, which was why I'd trusted his judgment about tutoring his sister. But the way Robert said it, with such certainty and disgust, made me wonder if there was something about Jamie's life I didn't know. Attorney Hayes gathered her documents. Mr. Thompson, my clients will seek a restraining order prohibiting you from coming within 500 feet of their daughter, their home, workplace, and Maya's school. Violation is a felony carrying significant jail time. Take this seriously. After they left, I sat alone trying to process what happened. In 30 minutes, I'd gone from respected teacher to accused of inappropriate conduct with a minor, placed on leave, and threatened with criminal charges. Someone had systematically destroyed my life using fabricated evidence, and I had no idea who or why. The drive home was a blur of confusion and panic. I kept replaying the meeting, trying to figure out how those text messages could have been created. The screenshots looked completely authentic, down to the font and formatting of my phone's messaging app. Either someone was expert at digital manipulation, or they'd somehow gained access to my phone number to send messages appearing to come from me. When I got home, I immediately called my cell carrier to request detailed records of all messages sent from my number over the past month. The representative said it would take 3 to 5 business days to compile records, but they could email a summary of message activity within 24 hours. That summary would show dates, times, and recipient numbers of every text I'd actually sent, proving the screenshots were fake. Next, I tried calling Jamie to explain what was happening and get his perspective. His phone went straight to voicemail, unusual since he typically answered immediately. I left a detailed message explaining the accusations, restraining order, and what his father had said about drugs, asking him to call back as soon as possible. While waiting for Jamie's call, I researched ways someone could send text messages appearing to come from my phone number. What I found was disturbing but not surprising. Multiple apps and websites allowed users to send fake texts from any phone number they wanted. The recipient would see whatever number the sender chose, making it appear authentic. Messages could even be formatted to look like they came from specific phone models with matching fonts. Someone with basic technical skills could easily create convincing fake screenshots that would fool most people. The more I researched, the more I realized how vulnerable everyone was to this digital impersonation. A malicious person could destroy someone's reputation using nothing but fake texts and doctored screenshots. The technology existed and was easily accessible with internet access and $30 for premium app features. But knowing how it could be done didn't help me figure out who was targeting me or why. My phone finally rang around 8 p.m., but it wasn't Jamie calling back. It was Maya herself, and she sounded terrified. Mr. Thompson, I'm so sorry about what happened today. My parents are completely wrong about everything, but they won't listen when I try to explain. Her voice was shaking, and I could hear her crying softly. I never sent those text messages to you, and you never sent inappropriate messages to me. Someone is lying about everything, and I don't know what to do. I felt relief hearing her confirm what I knew, but I was worried about her calling me directly. If her parents found out she'd contacted me after the restraining order meeting, it would make things worse for both of us. Maya, I believe you, but you shouldn't be calling me right now. Your parents are trying to get a restraining order, and any contact between us could be misunderstood. She was crying harder now, words coming out in broken sobs. But they're saying horrible things about you and about Jamie, and none of it's true. Someone showed them fake messages and convinced them you were trying to hurt me. They won't listen when I tell them the real tutoring sessions were completely normal and helpful. What do you mean about Jamie? I asked, remembering her father's comment about drug dealing. Your parents seemed to think he was involved with drugs somehow. Maya's crying stopped abruptly. When she spoke again, her voice was different, more careful and scared. I can't talk about Jamie right now. But Mr. Thompson, you need to stay away from our house and away from me at school. My parents are really angry, and they're talking about calling police again if they see you anywhere near me." The line went dead, leaving me with more questions than before. Why couldn't she talk about Jamie? What did her parents think they knew about his involvement with drugs? I spent the rest of the evening trying to piece together a timeline. The tutoring sessions with Maya had started 2 months ago and been completely normal. Jamie had asked me to help her because she was struggling with advanced algebra, and I'd agreed as a favor to an old friend. We'd met twice weekly at the public library or coffee shops, working through practice problems and reviewing difficult concepts. She'd been making good progress, and her grades had improved significantly. The fake text messages had supposedly been sent over the past 3 weeks, which coincided with Maya's improved math performance. Someone had waited until she was doing better academically before launching their attack against me. That timing seemed deliberate, as if they wanted to undermine the positive results of our tutoring relationship. But who would benefit from destroying my reputation and ending the arrangement? The next morning brought more bad news. I received an email from the school district's Human Resources Department extending my administrative leave pending full investigation by both the district and law enforcement. They also requested I surrender my district-issued laptop and any materials related to teaching duties. The email was coldly professional, treating me like I'd already been found guilty of misconduct. Attached was a copy of the restraining order approved by the courthouse. I was now legally prohibited from coming within 500 feet of Maya Foster, her home, her parents' workplaces, and Jefferson High School where she was a student. Violating the order would result in immediate arrest and criminal charges. My entire world had shrunk to exclude most places I normally went during a typical week. The restraining order also included a provision that I couldn't contact Maya directly or indirectly through third parties, which meant I couldn't even ask Jamie to help me communicate with her. But Jamie still hadn't returned my calls from the previous day, which was increasingly concerning. We'd been close friends for over a decade, and he'd never ignored my calls for more than a few hours. Something was definitely wrong. I decided to drive to Jamie's apartment to check on him in person. His building was outside the 500-foot radius specified in the restraining order, so I wouldn't be violating legal restrictions. When I arrived, his car was in the parking lot, but he didn't answer when I knocked. I could hear music playing inside, so I knew he was home. After knocking for several minutes with no response, I called his phone while standing outside his door. I could hear it ringing inside the apartment, but he never picked up. Either he was deliberately avoiding me or something had happened to prevent him from answering. I was about to leave when the door finally opened. Jamie appeared, but he looked terrible. His eyes were bloodshot, his hair was messy, and he was wearing the same clothes he'd had on the last time I'd seen him 3 days earlier. Most concerning was the way he looked at me, with a mixture of fear and guilt that made my stomach drop. "Dave, you can't be here right now," he said quietly, glancing around the parking lot nervously. "Things are really complicated, and I can't talk to you." His behavior confirmed my worst fears. Something was very wrong with Jamie, and it was somehow connected to the accusations against me. "Jamie, what's going on? Your sister's parents think I've been sending inappropriate messages to Maya, and they got a restraining order against me. They also said something about you dealing drugs, which doesn't make sense. I need your help to figure out what's really happening." Jamie's face went pale when I mentioned the drug accusation. He stepped back into his apartment, trying to close the door, but I put my foot in the way. "I can't help you," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Just stay away from me and stay away from my family. Don't try to contact any of us again." The fear in his voice was unmistakable. Someone had threatened him or convinced him that helping me would put him in danger. But Jamie had asked me to tutor his sister in the first place, so he knew better than anyone that I'd never done anything inappropriate with Maya. His sudden change in behavior meant either he was being coerced or he was involved in something that made him afraid to associate with me. Before I could ask more questions, Jamie slammed the door and turned the deadbolt. I could hear him moving around inside, probably watching through the window to make sure I left. The person who'd been my closest friend for over a decade was now treating me like a dangerous stranger. Driving home, I tried to make sense of Jamie's behavior and what it might mean for my situation. If he was actually involved with drug dealing like Maya's father had suggested, that could explain his fear of talking to me. Drug dealers typically avoided contact with anyone who might draw police attention, and I was now the subject of a criminal investigation. But Jamie had never shown signs of being involved with illegal activities. He had a good job, lived in a nice apartment, and had always been responsible with money and relationships. The idea of him dealing drugs seemed completely out of character, unless I'd been blind to a side of his life he'd kept hidden. On the other hand, if Jamie wasn't actually a drug dealer but someone had convinced Maya's parents that he was, that false accusation might be connected to the fake text messages they'd received about me. Someone could be systematically targeting both of us with fabricated evidence designed to destroy our reputations and relationships. That scenario would explain why Jamie was scared and why Maya's parents had been so hostile during the meeting at school. When I got home, there was a voicemail from my lawyer, Jennifer Walsh, returning the call I'd made the previous evening. Her message was brief but urgent, asking me to come to her office as soon as possible to discuss the restraining order and potential criminal charges. She also mentioned that she'd heard from the district attorney's office, which suggested the investigation was moving faster than I'd expected. The drive to Jennifer's office gave me time to organize my thoughts and prepare for what might be bad news. If the district attorney was already involved, it meant someone believed there was enough evidence to pursue criminal charges beyond just the restraining order. That could mean jail time, sex offender registration, and permanent destruction of my teaching career, even if I was eventually found innocent. Jennifer's office was downtown in a building housing several law firms. I'd used her services once before for a contract dispute, and she'd been competent and straightforward. When I walked into her office, she was reviewing a thick file of documents, presumably related to my case. Her expression was serious as she gestured for me to sit across from her desk. "David, we need to talk about the evidence they have against you and what your options are moving forward. The district attorney's office contacted me because they're considering formal charges related to inappropriate contact with a minor and possible stalking behaviors." She opened the file and spread out copies of the same text screenshots and photos I'd seen at the school meeting. These messages and images are quite damaging, and they paint a clear picture of escalating inappropriate behavior toward a minor student. The fact that you were in a position of authority as her tutor makes the charges more serious under state law. I interrupted her before she could continue. "Jennifer, those text messages are fake. I never sent them, and I can prove it. My cell phone carrier is sending me detailed records of every message actually sent from my number. When those records arrive, they'll show that none of those inappropriate messages came from me." Jennifer looked skeptical as she examined the screenshots more closely. "These look very authentic to me, David. The formatting matches your phone model, the number is correct, and the timestamps are consistent with a pattern of escalating behavior. How exactly do you think someone could have faked these so convincingly?" I explained what I'd learned about spoofing apps and fake message generators, showing her several websites on my phone that offered those services. Her expression shifted from skepticism to concern as she realized how easily someone could create false evidence against any person with a phone number. "This is disturbing, but it's also potentially good news for your case," she said. "If you can prove these messages were sent using spoofing technology rather than your actual phone, it would completely undermine the prosecution's case." We spent the next hour discussing strategy and next steps. Jennifer would request a forensic analysis of the screenshots to look for signs of digital manipulation. She'd also subpoena my complete phone records going back 6 months to establish a baseline of my actual messaging patterns with Maya and other students. Most importantly, she'd hire a private investigator to find out who might have targeted me with false accusations and why. As I was preparing to leave Jennifer's office, her secretary knocked on the door with an urgent message. The district attorney's office had called to schedule a meeting for the following morning, which suggested they were moving quickly toward filing formal charges. Jennifer's face was grim as she delivered the news. "They want to interview you tomorrow at 9 a.m. I'll be there with you, but you need to be prepared for the possibility that they'll arrest you immediately after the interview if they believe they have sufficient evidence." The possibility of being arrested sent a chill through my entire body. I'd never been in trouble with the law beyond occasional speeding tickets, and the idea of being handcuffed and processed like a common criminal was terrifying. Even worse was the knowledge that any arrest would be public record, meaning local newspapers and social media would spread the news throughout the community. My reputation would be destroyed permanently, regardless of whether I was eventually cleared of wrongdoing. That evening, I sat at my kitchen table trying to prepare for the district attorney interview. Jennifer had advised me to be completely honest about my relationship with Maya and Jamie, while being careful not to volunteer information that wasn't directly relevant to the questions being asked. She'd also warned me that investigators might try to trick me into contradicting myself or admitting to behaviors that could be misinterpreted as inappropriate. The hardest part was accepting that someone had deliberately chosen to destroy my life using fabricated evidence. The fake text messages weren't random or accidental. They were carefully crafted to suggest a pattern of grooming behavior that would be believable to parents and law enforcement. Someone had studied my relationship with Maya, learned enough about my daily routine to create convincing location photos, and invested time and effort into building a case against me. But I still couldn't figure out who would go to such lengths to frame me, or what they hoped to gain from my downfall. The tutoring sessions had been helping Maya improve her grades, so ending them would hurt her academic progress. My removal from the school would deprive other students of an experienced mathematics teacher who genuinely cared about their success. There seemed to be no logical benefit to anyone from destroying my career and reputation, unless the real target wasn't me at all, but Jamie. If someone wanted to hurt Jamie by cutting him off from his family and friends, framing his closest friend for inappropriate conduct with his sister would be an effective strategy. It would force Jamie to choose between supporting me or protecting himself from association with a suspected predator. The next morning, I arrived at the district attorney's office with Jennifer at exactly 9 a.m. The building was imposing, with heavy security and stern-faced staff who treated every visitor like a potential criminal. We were escorted to a small interview room with concrete walls, fluorescent lighting, and a metal table bolted to the floor. The atmosphere was designed to make suspects uncomfortable and more likely to confess or make mistakes. Detective Sarah Morrison entered the room first, followed by Assistant District Attorney Michael Torres. Both looked professional but unfriendly as they arranged their files and recording equipment on the table. Detective Morrison started the interview by reading me my rights and asking if I understood that anything I said could be used against me in court. Jennifer nodded for me to confirm my understanding, then reminded everyone present that I was there voluntarily to help with their investigation. Detective Morrison opened her file and pulled out enlarged copies of the text message screenshots. "Mr. Thompson, we'd like you to look at these messages and tell us if you recognize them." I examined each screenshot carefully, even though I'd already seen them multiple times. "I recognize my phone number, but I didn't send these messages. Someone used my number to send fake texts that were designed to make me look guilty of inappropriate behavior." Assistant District Attorney Torres leaned forward with obvious skepticism. "Mr. Thompson, these messages show a clear pattern of escalating inappropriate behavior toward a minor. The language becomes increasingly sexual over time, and there are requests for private meetings that would create opportunities for further inappropriate contact. This is textbook grooming behavior, and we have documentation of every step." I took a deep breath before responding, knowing that my next words could determine whether I was arrested immediately. "Sir, I understand how these messages look, but I'm telling you I didn't send them. Someone used spoofing technology to send fake messages from my phone number. My lawyer has requested detailed records from my cell phone carrier that will prove these messages never came from my actual phone." Detective Morrison made notes as I spoke, but her expression remained doubtful. "Mr. Thompson, can you explain why someone would go to such elaborate lengths to frame you for inappropriate conduct? What would they have to gain from destroying your reputation and career?" That was the question I'd been asking myself for days without finding a satisfactory answer. I honestly don't know. The only possibility I can think of is that someone wanted to hurt my friend Jamie by targeting his closest friend and his sister, but I don't know who would want to hurt Jamie or why. As soon as I mentioned Jamie's name, Detective Morrison and Ada Torres exchanged meaningful glances. There was something about Jamie that they knew, but I didn't. Morrison pulled out another file and placed a photograph on the table. It showed Jamie shaking hands with someone outside a downtown restaurant, but the other person's face wasn't visible. "Mr. Thompson, are you aware that your friend James Foster has been under investigation by our narcotics division for the past 6 months?" The room seemed to spin as that information sank in. Jamie was actually under investigation for drug dealing. His father's accusation hadn't been based on rumors or speculation. It was based on an active police investigation. That explained Jamie's strange behavior when I'd visited his apartment, his refusal to help me, and his fear of being associated with my case. If Jamie was really involved with drugs, my connection to him would make me look guilty by association. Ada Torres continued the revelation. "James Foster has been suspected of distributing narcotics to high school students throughout the county. We believe he's been using his sister Maya as a way to identify potential customers and establish connections within Jefferson High School. Your tutoring relationship with Maya may have been part of a larger drug distribution network." The accusation hit me like a physical blow. They thought I was involved in Jamie's drug dealing operation, using my position as Maya's tutor to help identify and recruit high school customers. It was completely wrong, but I could see how they'd reached that conclusion. My friendship with Jamie, combined with my access to high school students through my teaching job, would make me a valuable partner in a drug distribution scheme. That's absolutely not true, I said firmly. I've never been involved with drugs in any way, and I had no idea Jamie was under investigation. My tutoring relationship with Maya was completely legitimate, focused only on helping her improve her algebra grades. Detective Morrison pulled out more photographs, these showing me at various locations around town where drug deals had supposedly taken place. In each image, I was circled in red, apparently present during times when narcotics transactions were occurring, but I had legitimate reasons for being at those places. The coffee shop where I graded papers, the park where I jogged, the grocery store where I shopped. Someone had used my normal daily routine to suggest I was involved in criminal activities. The false text messages weren't just about inappropriate contact with Maya, they were part of a larger frame job designed to connect me to Jamie's drug dealing operation. Mr. Thompson, Ada Torres said slowly, we believe someone sent those inappropriate messages to Maya's phone in order to create evidence that would force her parents to end your tutoring relationship. If you were working with James to distribute drugs through high school students, and if Maya's parents discovered that relationship, it would threaten your entire operation. The theory was logical, but completely wrong. I wasn't involved with drugs, and Jamie hadn't asked me to end the tutoring relationship. If anything, he'd been pleased with Maya's improved grades and had thanked me multiple times for helping her, but I could see how the evidence would support their theory from an outside perspective. My close friendship with a suspected drug dealer, my access to high school students, my presence at locations where drug deals had occurred, and the convenient timing of the inappropriate messages all created a compelling narrative of guilt. Jennifer spoke up for the first time since the interview began. Detectives, my client has been completely cooperative with your investigation, and he's provided a reasonable explanation for the text messages that can be verified through phone company records. Unless you have evidence of actual drug dealing or inappropriate contact with minors, I don't see grounds for criminal charges. Detective Morrison closed her files and stood up from the table. Mr. Thompson, we're going to continue our investigation, and we'll be in touch when we have more information. I strongly advise you to avoid any contact with James Foster, Maya Foster, or anyone else connected to this case. Any attempt to interfere with our investigation will result in additional charges. As we left the district attorney's office, Jennifer warned me that they were likely building a case for multiple felony charges related to both drug distribution and inappropriate contact with a minor. Even if I was eventually cleared of wrongdoing, the investigation could take months or years to resolve. My teaching career was over. My reputation was destroyed, and I faced the possibility of decades in prison for crimes I hadn't committed. The drive home gave me time to process everything I'd learned during the interview. Jamie was really involved with drug dealing, which explained his strange behavior and his father's hostility toward him, but there was still one piece of the puzzle that didn't make sense. If Jamie was using Maya to identify potential drug customers at her high school, why would anyone want to end my tutoring relationship with her? My presence would actually help maintain the cover story that Jamie's interest in her school was academic rather than criminal, unless someone wanted to expose Jamie's drug dealing operation and was using me as a way to draw police attention to his activities. The fake text messages would force an investigation that would eventually lead police to discover Jamie's real crimes. I was being used as bait to catch a bigger fish, sacrificing my life and career to bring down a drug dealer who happened to be my best friend. When I got home, there was a message from my cell phone carrier with the detailed records I'd requested. Opening the email attachment, I found a complete log of every text message sent from my phone number over the past 2 months. The records clearly showed that none of the inappropriate messages from the screenshots had actually been sent from my phone. Every text I'd sent to Maya was related to tutoring schedules or math concepts, exactly what I'd told everyone from the beginning. But would anyone believe the phone records now that I'd been connected to a drug-dealing investigation? The evidence of my innocence regarding inappropriate messages might be dismissed as irrelevant if prosecutors believed I was involved in a larger criminal conspiracy. I needed to find out who was really behind the fake messages and why they'd targeted me specifically. Against my lawyer's advice, I decided to try reaching Maya one more time through an intermediary who wouldn't violate the restraining order. My former colleague, Rachel Brown, had left Jefferson High School the previous year to teach at a private academy across town. She didn't know Maya personally, but she still had friends among current Jefferson faculty who might be able to help. I called Rachel and explained my situation, being careful not to ask her to do anything that might get her in trouble. She was shocked to hear about the accusations against me, saying they didn't match the person she'd worked with for 3 years. She agreed to make some discreet inquiries among her former colleagues to see what students and teachers were saying about the case. Rachel called me back 2 hours later with disturbing news. According to her sources at Jefferson, Maya had been acting strangely for the past week, seeming scared and withdrawn in her classes. Several teachers had noticed the change in her behavior, but assumed it was related to stress from her parents' conflict with me. More concerning was the rumor that Maya had tried to tell her parents the truth about the fake messages, but they'd refused to listen and had threatened to send her to live with relatives in another state if she didn't stop defending me. The possibility that Maya was being punished for telling the truth made me feel even worse about the situation. She was being forced to watch her former tutor be destroyed by false accusations, while her parents ignored her attempts to set the record straight. Meanwhile, her brother Jamie was under investigation for drug dealing, which would tear their family apart when it became public knowledge. Someone had systematically destroyed multiple lives with carefully planned lies and fabricated evidence. Rachel also mentioned that there were rumors among the Jefferson faculty about Jamie's legal troubles, suggesting that word of the drug investigation was starting to leak out. If that information became widely known, it would add another layer of scandal to an already complicated situation. Parents would demand to know if their children had been exposed to drugs through connections to Jefferson High School, and the school administration would face serious questions about their oversight and security measures. As I was processing this information, my phone rang with a call from an unknown number. When I answered, a male voice I didn't recognize asked if I was David Thompson. When I confirmed my identity, the caller identified himself as Detective Frank Wilson from the County Sheriff's Department. "Mr. Thompson, we need to talk immediately. Can you meet me at the Denny's on Route 9 in 30 minutes? Come alone and don't tell anyone about this call." The mysterious request from a detective I'd never heard of set off alarm bells in my mind. It could be a legitimate law enforcement contact related to the investigation, or it could be someone trying to lure me into a trap. But I was desperate for any information that might help clear my name, so I decided to take the risk. Jennifer had told me not to talk to any law enforcement without her present, but this detective had specifically asked me to come alone. The Denny's restaurant was nearly empty when I arrived, with only a few customers scattered among the booths. A man in his 50s wearing a suit and tie was sitting alone in a corner booth, and he waved me over when I walked in. Detective Wilson looked tired and stressed as he gestured for me to sit across from him. "Mr. Thompson, what I'm about to tell you could save your life, but it could also get me fired if anyone finds out we talked." The dramatic opening made me wonder if I was being set up somehow, but Detective Wilson's expression seemed genuinely concerned rather than threatening. "I've been working undercover narcotics for 15 years, and I've been investigating your friend James Foster's drug operation for the past 8 months. What you don't know is that Jamie isn't the person behind the fake text messages that got you in trouble. Someone else is using this situation to frame both of you." My heart started racing, as I realized I might finally be getting answers about who was really targeting me. "Detective, I've been trying to figure out who would want to destroy my life and why. If it's not Jamie behind the fake messages, then who is it?" Wilson glanced around the restaurant to make sure no one was listening before continuing. "The person behind this is someone you've never met, but who knows everything about you and Jamie. Her name is Patricia Kane, and she's been Jamie's partner in the drug dealing operation for the past 2 years. She's also been stealing money from their shared accounts and selling information about their customers to rival dealers. Jamie recently discovered her betrayal and threatened to cut her out of the operation completely. The revelation that Jamie had a female partner in his drug dealing explained some of the missing pieces of the puzzle. Patricia Kane had access to information about Jamie's family, including his relationship with me and his concern about Maya's grades. She would have known that I was tutoring Maya, and that ending that relationship would hurt Jamie emotionally while creating problems for his sister. By framing me with fake text messages, she could accomplish multiple goals at once: revenge against Jamie for threatening her, elimination of a potential witness to their criminal activities, and deflection of police attention away from her own crimes. "Detective Wilson, why are you telling me this instead of arresting Patricia Kane for framing me?" I asked. Wilson's expression grew even more serious. "Because Patricia Kane is now working as an informant for the DEA in exchange for immunity from prosecution. The federal agents running her case don't want local police to interfere with her cooperation, even if it means letting her destroy innocent people like you. She's feeding them information about major drug suppliers, and they consider that more important than justice for the people she's framing. The news that my life was being sacrificed to protect a federal drug investigation was devastating, but not surprising. Law enforcement agencies often made deals with criminals to catch bigger criminals, and individual victims of those arrangements rarely received justice. Patricia Kane had successfully manipulated the system to avoid consequences for her crimes while ensuring that Jamie and I would face serious criminal charges for activities we'd never been involved in. What can I do to protect myself if the federal government is protecting the person who's framing me? I asked. Wilson reached into his jacket and pulled out a small digital recorder. I'm going to give you something that could help, but using it will put both of us in serious danger. This contains a recorded conversation between Patricia Kane and her DEA handler, where she admits to creating the fake text messages and planting evidence against you. She also talks about her plan to frame Jamie for drug dealing while she takes over their entire operation. The recorder felt heavy in my hands as I realized it contained evidence that could clear my name, but might also get me killed if the wrong people found out I had it. Detective Wilson, if this recording proves my innocence, why can't you just use it officially to end the investigation against me? Wilson shook his head grimly. Because I obtained this recording through illegal surveillance methods that would make it inadmissible in court. If I tried to use it officially, I'd be arrested for violating federal wiretapping laws, and the evidence would be thrown out anyway. The only way this helps you is if you can find a legal method to expose Patricia Kane's crimes without revealing how you learned about them. He stood up from the booth and adjusted his tie. Mr. Thompson, you have 48 hours before the district attorney files formal charges against you. After that, even this recording won't be enough to save you because the legal process will have momentum of its own. Find a way to expose Patricia Kane or prepare to spend the next 20 years in prison for crimes you didn't commit. After Wilson left, I sat alone in the booth, staring at the digital recorder and trying to figure out how to use the information it contained without destroying both of us in the process. The recording proved my innocence, but it had been obtained illegally and implicated federal agents in a cover-up that reached far beyond my local situation. Using it directly would result in charges against Detective Wilson and probably get us both killed by people who had too much invested in protecting Patricia Kane's cooperation with their investigation. But there had to be a way to expose her crimes without revealing the source of my information. If I could find evidence of her activities through legal means, the recording could serve as a roadmap to guide my investigation rather than direct proof of her guilt. I spent the drive home planning a strategy that would expose Patricia Kane while protecting Detective Wilson and myself from retaliation. The first step was to find out everything I could about Patricia Kane's background and current activities. If she was Jamie's partner in drug dealing, there would be a paper trail of their business relationship that could be discovered through legal means. Bank records, property transactions, communication patterns, and witness testimonies could all be obtained through proper legal channels if I knew where to look. Jennifer had mentioned hiring a private investigator to research who might be targeting me, and now I had a specific person to investigate. The second step was to find a way to make Patricia Kane reveal her crimes voluntarily, either through recorded conversations or documented communications that could be used as evidence in court. If she believed she was safe from prosecution due to her federal protection, she might be careless about covering her tracks or admitting to activities that she thought couldn't be used against her. When I got home, I called Jennifer's office and left an urgent message asking her to meet with me that evening. I couldn't tell her about Detective Wilson or the illegal recording, but I could share my suspicion that Patricia Kane was involved in framing me and ask her to focus the private investigation on that specific person. If the investigator could uncover evidence of Patricia Kane's crimes through legal methods, we might be able to build a case against her without relying on illegally obtained recordings. Jennifer called me back within an hour and agreed to meet at her office that evening. She sounded concerned about the urgency of my request, but didn't ask questions over the phone. When I arrived at her office, she was waiting with a cup of coffee and a legal pad full of notes from our previous conversations. I explained that I'd received information suggesting Patricia Kane was involved in framing me, though I couldn't reveal how I'd learned about her or the specific details of her crimes. Jennifer was frustrated by my refusal to share the source of my information, but she agreed to hire a private investigator to research Patricia Kane's background and connections to Jamie's activities. She also warned me that we had less than 48 hours before formal charges would be filed, which meant any evidence we discovered would need to be compelling enough to stop the prosecution immediately. The private investigator Jennifer recommended was a former police detective named Marcus Reynolds who specialized in financial crimes and drug-related investigations. He had contacts within law enforcement who could provide information about ongoing investigations without compromising their professional positions. More importantly, he had experience working with federal agencies and understood how to navigate the complex politics of multi-jurisdictional cases. Marcus agreed to meet with us immediately despite the late hour, recognizing the urgency of the situation. When Marcus arrived at Jennifer's office, he looked exactly like what I'd expected from a former police detective: tall, serious, and professionally skeptical of everything he heard. Jennifer explained the basics of my case and our suspicion that Patricia Kane was involved in framing me, though she left out the details about how we'd learned about Patricia's involvement. Marcus took notes as we spoke, asking specific questions about the timeline of events and the evidence that had been presented against me. After reviewing everything, he looked up from his notepad with a grim expression. This case has all the hallmarks of a professional frame job designed to eliminate competition in a drug-dealing operation. If Patricia Kane is really behind this, she's not working alone. Someone with law enforcement connections is helping her because she'd need inside information about how investigations work to create such convincing evidence against you. The possibility that corrupt law enforcement officials were involved in framing me was terrifying, but not entirely surprising. Detective Wilson had mentioned that Patricia Kane was working as a federal informant, which would give her access to law enforcement resources and protection from prosecution. If she had corrupt contacts within local police departments, she could obtain information about investigation techniques and evidence requirements that would help her create more convincing false accusations. Marcus pulled out his phone and made several calls to contacts within various law enforcement agencies, using careful language that wouldn't reveal the specific details of our situation. After 20 minutes of conversations, he hung up and turned back to Jennifer and me with a troubled expression. I've confirmed that there's an active federal drug investigation involving someone with the initials JF, which matches your friend Jamie Foster. I've also confirmed that this investigation involves a female informant who's been providing information for several months. The confirmation that Patricia Kane was really working as a federal informant validated Detective Wilson's information and explained why local prosecutors were so confident about pursuing charges against me. They believed they had federal backing for their case, not knowing that their evidence had been fabricated by the same informant who was supposedly helping with the larger investigation. Marcus continued his report. The good news is that I've also learned there are questions within the federal task force about the reliability of their informant. Apparently, some of the information she's provided has been inconsistent with other intelligence they've gathered, and there are concerns that she might be manipulating the investigation for personal reasons. If we can provide evidence that she's been fabricating information, the federal agents might be willing to reconsider their protection of her. Jennifer looked up from her notes with the first hopeful expression I'd seen from her since this nightmare began. Marcus, what kind of evidence would we need to convince federal agents that their informant has been lying to them? Marcus thought for a moment before responding. We'd need to show a pattern of deception that goes beyond just your case. If Patricia Kane has been providing false information about other aspects of the drug investigation, or if she's been involved in criminal activities that she hasn't disclosed to her federal handlers, that would undermine her credibility completely. We need to find other people she's targeted with false accusations or evidence of crimes she's committed while supposedly cooperating with law enforcement. The challenge was finding that evidence within the next 24 hours before formal charges were filed against me. Marcus said he could work through the night to research Patricia Kane's background and identify potential witnesses who might have information about her criminal activities. Jennifer would prepare legal motions to delay the filing of charges if we needed more time to present evidence of prosecutorial misconduct. My job was to think of anyone who might have information about Patricia Kane or Jamie's drug-dealing activities without violating the restraining order or interfering with the ongoing investigation. As we prepared to leave Jennifer's office, Marcus asked me one final question that made my blood run cold. Mr. Thompson, have you considered the possibility that Patricia Kane might try to eliminate you permanently rather than risk exposure of her crimes? If she's willing to destroy your life with false accusations, she might decide it's safer to arrange for you to have a fatal accident before you can clear your name. The idea that I might be in physical danger from Patricia Kane had never occurred to me, but it made perfect sense given everything else she'd done. If she was desperate enough to frame me for serious crimes and manipulate federal agents, she probably wouldn't hesitate to arrange for my death if she felt threatened. Marcus recommended that I stay in a hotel that night rather than going home, and that I avoid being alone in public places until the situation was resolved. He also gave me his personal phone number and told me to call immediately if I noticed anyone following me or if anything unusual happened. The drive to the hotel felt like the longest trip of my life, with every car behind me potentially containing someone sent by Patricia Kane to silence me permanently. I chose a hotel on the opposite side of town from where I normally spent time, paying cash and using a fake name to check in. The room was small and impersonal, but it felt safer than my own apartment where Patricia Kane could easily find me. I spent the night staring at the ceiling and listening to every sound in the hallway, wondering if the next knock on the door would be Marcus with good news or Patricia Kane's associates coming to eliminate the only person who knew the truth about her crimes. My phone remained silent until 6 a.m., when Marcus finally called with an update on his investigation. His voice sounded exhausted but cautiously optimistic. "David, I think we've found what we need to expose Patricia Kane and stop the charges against you, but we're going to need your help to make it work, and it's going to be dangerous." Marcus had discovered that Patricia Kane had been involved in at least 3 other cases where people had been falsely accused of crimes they didn't commit. In each case, the accusations had benefited her financially or romantically by eliminating competition or removing obstacles to her goals. More importantly, he'd found a witness who was willing to testify that Patricia had bragged about her ability to manipulate law enforcement investigations using fabricated evidence. The witness was a former girlfriend of one of Patricia's victims, and she had recordings of conversations where Patricia had admitted to creating false evidence against multiple people. The recordings had been made legally during a private conversation between the 2 women, which meant they could be used in court without the legal problems that plagued Detective Wilson's surveillance recording. But there was a catch. The witness was terrified of Patricia Kane and would only agree to come forward if she could be guaranteed protection from retaliation. She believed Patricia had connections to dangerous criminals who wouldn't hesitate to kill anyone who threatened her operation. Marcus had arranged for the witness to meet with federal agents later that morning, but she insisted that I be present during the meeting to verify that the crimes she was reporting were connected to my case. The meeting would take place at the FBI field office downtown, which should be safe from Patricia's associates, but would also put me in direct contact with the same federal agents who had been protecting her. If the meeting went wrong, I could end up facing additional charges or becoming a target for elimination by people with significant resources and legal authority. Jennifer met me at the hotel at 8 a.m. to discuss the risks and benefits of attending the meeting with the witness. She was concerned that the federal agents might try to pressure me into confessing to crimes I hadn't committed, or that they might dismiss the witness's testimony as an attempt to interfere with their ongoing investigation. On the other hand, this might be my only opportunity to present evidence of Patricia Kane's crimes directly to the people who had the power to stop her. We decided that I would attend the meeting with Jennifer present as my attorney, and that we would be prepared to leave immediately if the agent seemed hostile or unwilling to consider the evidence against their informant. The drive to the FBI field office was tense, with Marcus following behind us in his own car to ensure we weren't being followed by anyone working for Patricia Kane. The FBI building was intimidating, with heavy security and stern-faced agents who treated us like potential threats rather than people trying to report crimes. We were escorted to a conference room where 2 federal agents were waiting with recording equipment and thick files of documents. Agent Sarah Collins introduced herself and her partner, Agent Michael Torres, both of whom looked skeptical about the information we claimed to have about their informant. The witness, whose name was Linda Patterson, arrived 15 minutes later looking terrified, but determined to tell her story. She was a woman in her 30s who had been dating one of Patricia Kane's previous victims, and she had recorded several conversations where Patricia had admitted to framing people with false evidence. Agent Collins started the meeting by warning all of us that interfering with a federal investigation was a serious crime, and that any false statements we made could result in perjury charges. Linda Patterson took a deep breath and began describing her relationship with Patricia Kane's previous victim, a man named Robert Hayes, who had been falsely accused of domestic violence by Patricia after he'd ended their romantic relationship. Patricia had created fake text messages, doctored photographs, and recruited false witnesses to support her accusations against Robert. The case had destroyed his reputation and career, even though the charges were eventually dropped when Linda was able to prove that Patricia had fabricated the evidence. Agent Torres interrupted Linda's testimony to ask why she hadn't reported Patricia's crimes to law enforcement at the time they occurred. Linda explained that she had tried to report Patricia to local police, but they had dismissed her complaints as the jealous accusations of an ex-girlfriend trying to help her boyfriend avoid responsibility for his actions. She had only learned that Patricia was now working as a federal informant when Marcus contacted her about my case. Linda played the first recording, which clearly captured Patricia's voice describing how she had created false evidence against Robert Hayes. In the recording, Patricia laughed about how easy it was to fool police investigators and how she planned to use the same techniques against anyone else who crossed her. Agent Collins took notes as the recording played, but her expression remained neutral. The second recording was even more damaging, with Patricia specifically mentioning her plans to target a high school teacher who was interfering with her drug-dealing operation by tutoring the wrong person's sister. She described creating fake text messages that would make the teacher look like a predator, using surveillance photos to suggest stalking behavior, and manipulating the victim's family into believing their daughter was in danger. The recording had been made just 3 days before the fake messages appeared on Maya's phone. Agent Torres stopped the recording and asked Linda how she had obtained these conversations with Patricia Kane. Linda explained that Patricia had contacted her several months earlier, claiming to want to make amends for what she had done to Robert Hayes. During their conversations, Patricia had bragged about her criminal activities and her ability to manipulate law enforcement, not knowing that Linda was recording everything for her own protection. The recordings were completely legal under state law, which allowed single-party consent for recording private conversations. Agent Collins excused herself from the conference room to make several phone calls, presumably to verify Linda's story and discuss the implications with her supervisors. When she returned 20 minutes later, her attitude had changed completely. Instead of skepticism, she now looked angry and concerned about what she had learned. "Ms. Patterson, Mr. Thompson, we've just confirmed that several pieces of information provided by our informant Patricia Kane have been inconsistent with other intelligence sources. We're now investigating the possibility that she's been manipulating our investigation for personal reasons." Agent Collins turned to me with an apologetic expression. "Mr. Thompson, based on what we've heard today, we believe you've been the victim of a systematic campaign of false accusations designed to destroy your reputation and eliminate you as a potential witness to criminal activities. We're going to recommend that all charges against you be dropped immediately, and we're going to open a formal investigation into Patricia Kane's abuse of her informant status." The relief I felt was overwhelming, but I also realized that Patricia Kane was still dangerous and would probably try to eliminate me once she learned that her crimes had been exposed. Agent Torres seemed to read my thoughts and addressed my concerns about retaliation. "Mr. Thompson, we're going to place Patricia Kane under immediate arrest, and we're going to provide protection for you and the other witnesses until she can be safely incarcerated. We're also going to review every piece of information she's provided during her cooperation with our investigation to determine what other false accusations she may have made." The arrest of Patricia Kane happened so quickly that she didn't have time to destroy evidence or flee the area. Within 2 hours of our meeting at the FBI office, agents had taken her into custody at her apartment, along with computers and phones containing evidence of her various criminal schemes. They also arrested 2 local police officers who had been providing her with information about ongoing investigations in exchange for money and sexual favors. The corrupt officers had helped Patricia create more convincing false accusations by giving her details about how evidence was processed and what kind of documentation would be most believable to prosecutors. By that evening, the district attorney's office had officially dropped all charges against me and issued a public statement acknowledging that I had been the victim of false accusations. The statement didn't provide details about Patricia Kane or the federal investigation, but it cleared my name and reputation in the community. The school district also issued a statement reinstating me with full back pay and apologizing for the administrative leave that had been imposed without sufficient investigation of the accusations. Jamie was released from custody the same day, after federal agents determined that Patricia Kane had been setting him up to take responsibility for drug crimes that were primarily her operation. The evidence showed that Jamie had been involved in relatively minor drug sales, mostly to adult friends rather than high school students, while Patricia had been running a much larger distribution network that supplied multiple schools throughout the county. Maya's parents issued a public apology for their role in the false accusations against me, acknowledging that they had been manipulated by fabricated evidence and had failed to listen to their daughter's attempts to tell them the truth. They also requested that the restraining order against me be dismissed, and they asked if I would be willing to resume tutoring Maya to help her prepare for upcoming final exams. The request to resume tutoring felt like the ultimate vindication of everything I had been through. Maya's parents had seen the evidence of Patricia Kane's manipulation and realized that their daughter had been telling the truth all along. Their willingness to trust me again with Maya's education showed that my reputation had been genuinely restored, not just legally, but personally. I agreed to resume the tutoring sessions, though we decided to meet at the public library with Maya's parents present until everyone felt completely comfortable with the arrangement again. 6 months later, Patricia Kane pleaded guilty to multiple federal charges, including obstruction of justice, wire fraud, conspiracy to distribute narcotics, and violation of civil rights under color of authority. She was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison without the possibility of parole. The 2 corrupt police officers who had been helping her were also convicted and received sentences of 8 years each. Detective Wilson was quietly transferred to a different department and never faced charges for his illegal surveillance, though he was reprimanded for his methods. The federal task force that had been relying on Patricia Kane's information had to restart their entire investigation, but they eventually made several major arrests based on legitimate evidence rather than fabricated accusations. My teaching career not only survived the false accusations, but was actually strengthened by the experience. Students and parents who had heard about my ordeal and vindication seemed to respect me more, seeing me as someone who had been tested and proven trustworthy. Maya's grades continued to improve throughout the rest of the school year, and she was accepted to her first-choice college with a partial scholarship for mathematics. Jamie completed a court-ordered rehabilitation program and found legitimate employment as a software developer, using his experience with the criminal justice system to advocate for other people who had been falsely accused of crimes. The experience taught all of us that the truth doesn't always emerge immediately, but it's worth fighting for, no matter how hopeless the situation seems.